dude Ben here, and Beers with Ben, and we're doing this, I guess, to celebrate the release of my next album, Volume 5. So tonight we've got Duck Rabbit. It's milk stout. Had it a handful of times before. It's semi-smooth, kind of darker, rich beer. Not as strong as you would think, being a milk stout, but it's decent. And, got it on sale, so can't complain about that. So let's get straight into it and talk about Volume 5, which I'm pretty relieved to be finished with it and it being out in the world. Honestly, I think this is my strongest release by far, which, I would hope it would be, progressing forward, building upon each, subsequent release, whenever Volume 6 or Volume 7 or whatever comes out, I would hope that I would be able to say, this is my strongest work yet. But yeah, Volume 5 just kicks ass in my opinion, and I'm really happy with it. I technically started writing a couple of riffs back at the height of the pandemic. September, October, somewhere in there of 2020. So, this time, like 3 years ago, I was just jamming one night, working on some other stuff, with like probably Volume 2 or Volume 3 music, and just came up with a couple of riffs, kind of demoed them out, and let them sit for, 2 years or however long before I got to them. And of course, re-record them and everything, but like 2 different songs, I had a couple ideas, that far back, but in actuality, I really started writing and sort of recording really as I went along, starting with, the first track all the way to track 10. And I started that, I think it was this past late November, maybe early December. And that was really kind of coming down to, getting ready to release Volume 3. I'd already done Volume 4 kind of around the same time, minus, a couple of mixing tweaks, right before I released Volume 4 a couple of months ago. But just went straight into Volume 5, just didn't want to lose any momentum or anything, and so just started riffing, different ideas, and just recording as I went, doing drums as I went along, and turned back around once I had the drum set, and retrack or whatever, guitars and bass and everything, and did vocals like dead last when it came to recording, and so yeah, that's basically that, from November to really August, like end of August sort of thing, was working on all this stuff. And so let's talk into, the story itself and whatnot. And one of the things that I really want to point out with this, and this was part of, I wouldn't say it was like a huge part of the writing process for the lyrics or anything, but it was something that I kept in mind as I started writing the lyrics. Was that I wanted most every song somehow to incorporate the fruits of the Holy Spirit. Specifically from Galatians 5, which I'll read it here. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And each song I wanted, to incorporate one of these fruits into it. And specifically in my notes here, I have written that the fruit is contrasted with the works of the flesh, which immediately precedes, this list of fruits from this chapter in Galatians. But when it comes to like the works of the flesh, I had them really only apply to chapter 41 of this album, which deals with a character that I call the nihilist, which I'll get into in a little bit. But the other thing I need to point out is that until like the very last track of this album, each song, at least in my mind, it probably isn't completely evident to anybody else who would be reading the lyrics, but at least to me, each song needs, or it had like a subtle detail that are steps leading to the protagonist's eventual escape from this prison. Spoiler alert with that. But basically these steps, minus the very last track, track 10, which is chapter 47, each step is kind of meant to be an antithesis of the fruits of the Spirit. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're equated with the works of the flesh, but this is like me talking, not some like divine revelation from God or anything like that. Paul, the Apostle Paul, sort of did the same thing, in the New Testament, pointing out, hey, this is me, Paul, speaking. I'm not saying it's God on this. This is just like my opinion on this sort of thing, and it's the same thing, for me, not to equate myself with the Apostle Paul at all, because, he would probably want to smack me in the face most of the time, but, that's how it goes. But in all seriousness, these like antitheses in each chapter kind of represent bad actions or amoral steps. Certain things that I personally wanted to point out as being, an antithesis to the fruits of the Spirit. And then like the third thing that I want to point out is that each song is sort of like a character arc. It focuses on one or two characters or maybe multiple characters, but I tried to kind of stick with one or two characters along with the protagonist. And with that, when I sat down and wrote the lyrics to this album and the story, I didn't want to focus on the protagonist anymore. I felt like I'd really, it sort of being his like first person sort of point of view. It just seemed kind of boring to me at this point. And the fact that like really from from volume 1 through 4, it's the protagonist kind of reacting to different things going on around him. And there's not a lot of other characters at all, other than like the Aurora character, which is really kind of more mentioned at the end of volume 1 and briefly mentioned in volume 3 or 4, maybe. It's hard to keep up with at this point, but it's so far been a focus really on the protagonist himself and his perspective of everything going on around him. And in this, I wanted to actually incorporate other characters, and hence the title of the album, being Volume 5, Commune. And so what's going on in this is that the protagonist finds himself aligned with a community of, a number of different people. And so let's list out all the characters so you sort of know who they are. And the first character obviously being the protagonist. The second character is actually already mentioned in volume 3, the character of Lady Elm. And, she's obviously a female, and she is some kind of royalty who has been in prison for basically political reasons. Going into like specifics of that, something that I'm not interested in doing in these songs, is just sort of briefly mentioned. The third character is named Eugene. He's a dude, and he ties in with Lady Elm, which we'll get into as this progresses. The fourth character is called the Catechist. And the Catechist is a female and is, like in Roman Catholicism, a catechist is a teacher of doctrine, essentially, within the Catholic Church. And so that is kind of the impetus of the catechist for this. In the artwork that I created, she is basically a nun. Like, she's in like the nun wardrobe. Let's see, the fifth is an older gentleman by the name of Parson Brown, which a parson is basically a Protestant pastor, clergyman. It's a name that I derived specifically from the song Winter Wonderland. I just thought it would be cool because, that like Christmas song mentions a Parson Brown in it, and it's like, who the hell is Parson Brown? who knows? But in this, I just kind of figured, hey, that's kind of a nice little throwback, if you will. The sixth character is named, I call him the Black Knight. He is a male in a massive suit of black armor. He's basically a POW. Um, Way back at the very beginning, like chapter 1, 2, 3 of volume 1, we talked about the protagonist being a soldier in this war, this cultural war. And so this Black Knight is a guy who was on the opposite side. He would have been somebody that the protagonist originally would have fought against. And hence he would have been considered an enemy, but now they're friends and part of this commune together, and who he is underneath the armor is something we'll eventually get into. The next character is named Master Bates. Because he's a master and his last name is Bates. I wanted to name him this because I think it's funny, and it ties in with his character. He is, unbeknownst to them, kind of a spoiler alert here, he's a complete nihilist, like to the nth degree. Has no faith. He's kind of more like a personified evil in a sense. Not a major character, but he has his own song, basically. Then the next character is named Auteur. Auteur is a very minor character when it comes to this community. She is a female. Before her imprisonment, she was some kind of like artist, or specifically a filmmaker, because like an auteur is this like French term for like someone, a director, a filmmaker who is like specifically known for a certain aesthetic or style. But Auteur was imprisoned because of her art, questioning like the authority, anti-propaganda, and the like. So that's her. And then the final two characters is Aurora, the female from volume 1 and 2. We'll talk about her later on. And then last is a character called the Anchor. And suppose that's a male character, whatever. And is a character on TV, like a news anchor. And then there's like a couple of random prisoners. But this is all to say that lyrically, and especially if you look in the liner notes, which you can download for free on Bandcamp, just saying. This this album is laid out specifically like a script of sorts of like the different characters speaking and dialoguing and whatnot. And so, in the past it was just the protagonist speaking, but, this album has multiple speakers within each song. So, like, if you don't know who's speaking, it may even appear that some of the lines might like contradict each other or whatever. So I think it is important to note that the songs have different speakers within them, and that reflects, their worldview, their personality, their beliefs, their, character, what have you. So that's basically the overview of Volume 5. And so now let's talk about the first track for the album, which is chapter 38. And this song is called The Marriage of Elm and Eugene. Now, this song in particular is 100% told from the protagonist's vantage point, which it's only like one of two songs on the album that are just the protagonist speaking. And now that I think about it, both songs that are only from the protagonist standpoint happen to be like the two shortest songs on the entire album. That's kind of cool to think about. I didn't even mean it to be that way, but thinking about it now, like, yeah, that's what was going on. So, the main. So my notes here, I have like, the lyrics written down and whatever, but I also have, the specific overviews of each song, and I have them kind of split out between, like talking about the music itself, the speakers, the literal meaning, fruits of the spirit, the amoral steps, and then like the personal meaning, and also like different references within the song. Don't have much to say about the music here. I wanted it to have like a very vintage kind of feel to it. So as like the vocals were very EQ'd a certain way and filtered a certain way, so it was like basically no bass tone in the voice, and sounds like, I don't know, something from like, I don't know, like 1930s or 1940s or something, without it being like too lo-fi, I guess. This was actually like the music I wrote first, back in like September of 2020. And I just wanted this song to really be simple. I didn't want to go overboard with it. Just multiple tracks of me playing, these like washed out reverb guitar lines or whatever, and like a kind of trippy sort of ambient, I guess is the word I'm looking for, guitar lines sort of pushed back into the background to sort of push the song along. And that's basically it. There's, a line from the movie, The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, at the very beginning of the song. Great movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. But I wanted it to be a fairly straightforward song. So like the literal meaning of the story here, told from the protagonist standpoint, is that, and really this is the song that sets up that he's part of the community, and it's kind of short and to the point. There's a wedding that takes place between the characters Lady Elm and Eugene. So I like to think that after the end of Volume 4, the protagonist, he's kind of left his viewing post of the outside world, and he runs into this Lady Elm character again, who she embraces him in this like motherly kind of fashion and introduces him to a number of other characters who are all prisoners within this prison, this huge prison. And so because of Lady Elm, he's brought into essentially, a tribe, a group of other prisoners. And this song kind of introduces the tribe as a collective. Each character is involved or part of the wedding party in a sense, but it's just him setting up that he's part of this collective and he's no longer alone. And so that means that there has been some time that has passed between Volume 4 and Volume 5. And nothing, nothing really big has happened. He's just been embraced by these people. And yeah, that's basically that. I have written down here that he should be within like another courtyard of sorts, but it's meant to be more beautiful than the one before, with its own garden and everything. But honestly, when I painted the artwork for this song, it was like in front of one of those, I don't know what it's called, but it's like the height chart, that you see in like police lineups. I kind of got the idea, the visual for that from like the, I think it was like the movie poster for The Usual Suspects. That was kind of what I was thinking, and that like they find this room that is, like the prototypical like police lineup sort of thing, and literally they get married in this room. And either way, whether it's, in a courtyard or in this like police lineup sort of thing, the protagonist notices how like dingy and dirty they are as prisoners, but recognizes that none of that matters in this setting, that they're like surrounded by beauty and knows God is in this place. And whether that's, that beauty is from like a garden, in this outdoor environment, or within, this emotional, spiritual kind of setting of this wedding, you know, either way, you know, it's not an and or, it's really just a both to me. And so that's what this song's about. The fruit of the Spirit that this song mentions obviously is love. And in like looking this stuff up and kind of doing some cursory research into it, I found that like the message, who was that, Eugene Peterson, I want to say, his, it's not really a translation, but anyway, I like the message a lot. I think it's pretty cool. But anyway, he reworded it as like an affection for others. And so like the amoral step that I kind of point out in this song, like the antithesis of that would be like a devaluation of human dignity. And so the personal meaning of this song, first off, you have to be kind of from this area to recognize, hopefully, Elm and Eugene, which this idea has literally kind of been in my head, you know, I guess for like a year and a half, 2 years now, that I would get to this point, you know, with like volume 5. Just, I didn't like write anything down or anything. It was just in my head that I wanted to go this direction. And Elm and Eugene specifically refers to 2 streets in downtown Greensboro where I live. Depending on which direction you're going, they're either coming together or they're branching apart from one another. Basically what happens in like actual like downtown is that these 2 completely separate streets, Elm and Eugene, you know, at a certain point they kind of run parallel together, but sort of in like the south side of the city, they actually converge together and become one street, which is literally called like Elm-Eugene Street. And so like literally this is, their names are a reference to my home. And when I, you know, I was like literally driving to my church one day, which isn't too far from like Eugene Street. When I, like, it sort of hit me, it was like, oh shit, you know, Elm and Eugene, like, that would be cool to kind of do. And it sort of hit me after that, you know, I don't want to get like weird with this sort of statement here, but it made me wonder if that, like, this album somehow, some way is some kind of like prophecy or something towards my city, or maybe not Greensboro itself, but, you know, maybe my little corner of it. And I don't know if it would be a prophecy or not, because I'm not entirely sure that there's, well, I'm very sure, you know, where the ending of this volume goes, and I'm not sure I want that to be the case, you know, as like a prophecy. Maybe it's meant to be more of a warning of sorts than some sort of prophetic word or whatever. And, you know, if it was a prophecy, I honestly don't know what like it's supposed to mean. So um, that's why I'm very, very skeptical of even saying that of myself, because when somebody says, from like charismatic or Pentecostal tradition of, this is like some sort of prophetic statement or whatever, I think a lot of people do that a little too haphazardly. Um, I mean, Old Testament, a false prophet is supposed to be like basically stoned to death, right? So, yeah, even though like Christianity, we're not living in Old Testament times anymore, and Jesus fulfilled the law and whatnot, you know, still isn't something that should be taken lightly. Um, so I'm throwing that out there, but even I'm skeptical of that concept. And if somebody like my buddy Dan is watching this, maybe use some discernment even with that. Like it was just a thought, of like what if this is some sort of warning or whatever. I don't know. Um, so I definitely don't want to say that lightly. But anyway, kind of back to this specific song. Um, for me, this song really is a simple, like, personal meaning. Um, I think I've mentioned this before, and I've definitely written about it in my own work, but Rob Bell's book, Sex God, has been I really like that book. It's been years since I read it, but I think he brings up a lot of really interesting points in it. And I, going on like some 8 years ago when I read the book, I was involved as like a groomsman in 3 different wedding ceremonies, and then not long after that, ended up kind of involved in a fourth um, ceremony of sorts. And a lot of that stuff kind of tied in with, the woman I wanted to marry. And I've talked about that ad nauseum. Um, but I only mention that because there's just something about weddings. And it's like Rob Bell in his book sort of, well, he directly points out that weddings are this like microcosm of what like heaven is supposed to be like. And being involved in this handful of different weddings, in the past, and even other weddings, through the years, there's always, for me at least, this awareness of reverence that, this is something special, and that, this, even if it's the briefest moment, is like seeing heaven come to earth. And like the funny thing for me is that even if I'm at like a wedding for like non-religious people, it still seems that way. And I don't completely understand why that is, but it's supposed to be an example of love and of like this transcendent heavenly sort of love. And something that, especially somebody like me, doesn't, like, I don't get to experience that for myself, but I get to see it in other people, and, you know, that brings hope. And it shows this idealistic goodness that humans are capable of in dedicating their own lives to one another. And maybe that's too idealistic for some people, but that is what the vows are supposed to be about. I mean, hell, even if it's just a state wedding at the courthouse, no religious anything within that wedding, it's still based on this foundational ideal of like dedicating your life to somebody else. And so that's what this song is about. It's simple as that. The only like reference that I have within the song is that he represents, you know, like a knot, you know, K-N-O-T. You know, that reference is tying the knot, you know, which is, you know, this idiomatic expression of weddings. But I don't think most people know what tying the knot actually means. I certainly didn't until my buddy Michael and Leslie got married, you know, like 8-9 years ago. They were part of the like series of 3 or 4 weddings that I was a groomsman or a part of. And let's see, they got married in it was an Episcopalian church. And the priest literally he had, you know, his like white robe thing on, and he had a like literal rope tied around his waist the whole time. But like when they like exchanged the vows and everything, he undid the rope from his waist and then took the rope and like tied their arms together, as, you know, to symbolize, you know, this like spiritual connection between the bride and the groom. And so, you know, I referenced that in this song, you know, just looking at the lyrics themselves. Ivy wed, till death do us part, you know, she held the knot. And, you know, if you want to call it like a one-line chorus, you know, it's, for the briefest moment, all feels right with the world. Or, you know, for the briefest moment, heaven has come to earth. And that's what this song is about 100%, is, you know, this kind of transcendent feeling in seeing a wedding. And so you know, it points out, like in sort of like a bridge kind of later on in the song, the protagonist says, "I haven't seen her smile this tenderly since she found me wandering despondent, when she embraced and brought me into our tribe." And that, you know, that bridge itself is meant, you know, I mean, it's literally a bridge between like volume 4 and volume 5. It sets up that there's a tribe going on here. And the last line going into like the amoral step and everything, it says, in a dingy world devaluing human dignity, I may not be the best man, but today I'm yours. And I guess you can say that sort of has like a double meaning, you know, him saying, you know, oh, I'm not like the best man, you know, like morally or character speaking, you know, I'm not like the greatest human being ever. And, you know, also like the best man is within like the wedding party. But either way, he's the protagonist is saying like, but today I'm yours. And so I guess that is the protagonist, you know, directing that doubly towards God and also towards like Eugene and Lady Elm and just like the tribe in general. So that's chapter 38, and tomorrow we'll get into the next song, chapter 39.